Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. And in this update, we are going to check out Ondo's price chart and see what is happening in the short term. And based on the current structures, what might be the next likely move. But before we get into all that good stuff, we got some fantastic news to talk about in Ondo. And in case you're not really active on Twitter or generally you're not really following the blockchain news, you should know that this is, in my view at least, one of the most bullish news that we could ever ask for about Ondo. And they just announced that Ondo has received official approval to offer tokenized stocks and ETFs across the entire European Union and also EEA. Now, the key part in here is actually how they did it, not necessarily the approval itself. They actually did it through Liechtenstein Financial Market Authority, and we are going to break this down step by step, and I'm going to try to explain why this is such a massive deal without really making it a whole lot complicated. So, are we ready? Let's dive in and see what is going on, and let's talk about actually the core idea, because the reason everybody is paying attention to this news is because of something called passporting. And essentially in Europe, if a regulated financial product is going to get approved in one recognized jurisdiction, that approval can be copied or passed into all the other EU/EEA countries. And that means, well, no need to apply 30 times, no need to deal with 30 different regulators, which is awesome. And guess what? Liechtenstein is actually one of the smartest entry points for this, because their FMA is actually part of the European Economic Area and their approvals are recognized across all EU members. So when Ondo got their base prospectus approved there, it wasn't just a local license. No, it instantly unlocked access into number 1, Germany, number 2, France, number 3, Italy, number 4, Netherlands, number 5, Spain, 6, Australia, and 7, about, let's say, 20 other markets as well. So essentially, in only one move, Ondo gained access to a population of about 500 million people who previously couldn't really legally buy tokenized US ETFs on chain. Now, in my view, this is actually a massive deal for Ondo, because most RWA projects today are limited to accredited investors. And that means only wealthy people, institutions, or maybe qualified investors can participate in here. And if you don't know why, this is actually because tokenized stocks are normally considered securities, and securities do have very strict rules. But this approval specifically allows retail access, and that, my friends, is the part that changes the whole game in here. You see, retail access means normal people like you and me in Europe can buy tokenized US ETFs directly on chain through a regulated framework, and this is the equivalent of turning tokenized assets from a small niche into something very much mainstream consumers can actually use. And that, my friends, is absolutely awesome. And it's very important to understand that the products themselves are not really crypto coins. No, they are tokenized versions of real US assets, like, for example, maybe major stock indexes, maybe US equity ETFs, possibly BlackRock or maybe Vanguard products, maybe even other popular market funds. And Europe has always had a strong demand for US market access, and Ondo is basically giving them that access, but with 24/7 blockchain settlement instead of the unusual banking delays. Now, having said all that, I guess the question is, what are the possible future effects of this for Ondo? And the first effect, in my view, comes down to TVL growth. You see, Ondo Global Markets already has around, I think it was the last time that we checked, 315 million plus in terms of TVL, and that number comes from a group of users who mostly faced restrictions. Now that retail is open, well, okay, the pool of potential buyers in here is going to grow massively, and as new capital flows in, TVL is probably, in my view, going to rise. And the higher that TVL is going to have, we can say, well, okay, this is probably signaling growing adoption, which often influences how the project and also its governance token is valued in the mid to long term. Second important effect comes down to, in my view, fintech integrations, because This approval actually puts Ondo in a position where fintech companies in Europe, applications like, for example, maybe Revolut, Bitpanda, and even smaller DeFi platforms can legally plug Ondo assets into their products. And most of these platforms already want to offer US stocks, but unfortunately, building the legal infrastructure in here is going to be extremely costly. And if you're a small project, well, let's be honest, you don't really have the money to do it. But now, well, Ondo is going to become probably the back-end provider for these guys that can rely on, and this opens doors for partnerships that expand distribution far beyond crypto ecosystem. And here is the final positive effect. It actually comes down to, in my view, growing protocol revenue. You see, these tokenized ETFs generate fees, and it's very important to understand that usually these fees are actually management fees or maybe a small spreads. So as more users buy these assets, Ondo is going to earn more and more revenue, and this isn't really a speculative revenue. No, this is based on real economic activity tied to a real world asset, and the more retail adoption is going to grow, the more stable and also very much predictable those earnings are going to become. So in conclusion, this approval, in my view, is like a massive step forward for Ondo, mainly because it actually opens legal access to a huge market, and it creates real potential for growth, new partnerships, and also more protocol revenue. And at the same time, I fully understand that this isn't like a 100% guarantee of success. No, adoption, do not get it twisted, still very much, in my view, depends on whether European retail actually wants tokenized ETFs and whether fintechs choose to integrate Ondo's product. But from a regulatory and a structural standpoint, in my view, this is giving Ondo a very much strong position and a real advantage over competitors who still lack similar approval. So overall, I think this is definitely a fantastic bullish news for Ondo. And you might say, well, okay, why aren't we seeing the effects of this on the live chart? That's because this is actually a piece of positive development for the mid to long term, okay? I promise you, you are not really going to see the effects of this in like very short term, maybe in the next 24 to about 48 hours. If you want to know what's going to happen in the short term, you're probably better off paying more attention to what is happening in terms of technical analysis. And well, my field of work is especially Elliott waves. And if you remember the last time that we talked about Ondo, we were right around these areas, and we were saying, well, although we are sort of kind of able to identify in this move on the upside a 5-wave impulsive structure, but right in here, we shouldn't really be bullish because this is kind of a strong move on the downside. And if you remember, we specifically measured this move down timing wise to about here, and we said, well, okay, essentially we are having a move as strong as this move on the upside, since in this phase down we completely covered this part of the price action. So bulls aren't really that powerful, and odds are this is actually going to continue, and in it we are most likely going to, unfortunately in Ondo, take this important slow down here about 55 cents area, and maybe we're going to end up going quite a bit lower than that. And also we talked about, if you remember, specifically a very important sign, and that came down to indicators. And if I just zoom in more, okay, so in the previous video we were saying that on the live chart we are having in here maybe a low, maybe a low, and the other ones are low lows. But in MACD, we said, look, it seems like that we are having a series of higher lows, which can be technically considered as a bullish divergence. But the moment that we end up in Ondo going down and getting a break of this important divergence line, and as you can see, we got a break of it right at this candlestick, we said, well, at that point, count on a continuation of this move down with quite a bit more confidence. And again, the moment that we broke the divergence line, our move actually continued for quite a bit. The question is, can we argue that right in here we are going to hit the lows? I'll be honest with you, I don't really think so. Why is that? Let's go on 15-minute time frame, zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so here's the situation. You see, in terms of Elliott waves, if you want to be bullish on any chart and you want to argue, for example, we're going to have our final low around here, then okay, you have to be able to find them off of the lowest low in this region, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave on the upside. And if I just go in here, well, okay, let me ask you this. How exactly are you able to find a 5-wave in here? Like, do not get me wrong. It is sort of kind of possible for us to find an impulse, but the shape of it is actually going to look so odd to a degree that is going to make us say, yeah, you know what, maybe we should consider some other possibilities as our primary cases, suggesting, well, we're going to get another move on the downside. And also, after a 5-wave up, if we are truly bullish and the final low is already in, we are actually going to witness a rather slow and choppy move on the downside, which timing wise is actually going to take more time relative to this move on the upside. And if we just go in here, there we go. So let's just measure this move down real quick. As you can see, so far this move down is taking us about 50 candlesticks. On the other hand, this move up happened in almost about, let's say, 90 candles. So essentially, in this face down, seems like that bears do actually have a bit of power. Now, having said that, I don't really want to deny the possibility of maybe having another move on the upside, specifically because I think if you go on some lower time frames, you are able to say maybe this is like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 followed by I'm gonna say probably an A triangle for wave B, another move down into our C leg, and then again we may see another move up, possibly if we are lucky, maybe like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order to take this important high. I don't want to deny having such a move, but I need you to understand that even if we are getting this thing in here, we shouldn't really be like 100% bullish, okay? At that point, I just want you to consider the possibility of either having a WXY in form of a double zigzag, meaning this is essentially going to be an ABC zigzag, or possibly even maybe another count indicating this is ABC up into A, ABC down into B. And even if we're going to get a 5-wave up in here, be careful, that might be into the C leg of an ABC flatter structure, meaning what? Our move down in Ondo may actually continue a little bit. And here is my final reason for why I think right now it's a little bit too soon in like very short term to jump into any bullish conclusions. Well, unfortunately, right around the current area, I'm not really able to find a whole lot of strong supports. So why not continue our move down in order to get to about the next important region, which I think it was about 15 to 20% lower. So for now, let's be patient, let's be careful, let's not be overwhelmingly optimistic. But having said all that, if you are thinking about buying Ondo for the mid to long term, well, I think your strategy is going to be DCA. And I also forgot to tell you this, I am also buying Ondo as we go down and down and down in order to get my average purchase as low as possible, because I do think in the long term, since this is a project with a solid fundamental, I think we are going to see good price appreciation for this token. But you know, maybe in this phase we are going to continue our move down a little bit. No worries at all. From my POV, it's just going to be buy opportunity for the mid to long term. And I hope I explained everything well and you understood what is going on in Ondo. Anyway, if you found any value in my content, I would really appreciate if you like this video and consider subscribing to my channel, and also follow me on Twitter, and maybe if you want, follow me on my main channel as well. And until the next update, I hope you have a wonderful time. Goodbye.